Welcome to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Dr. Dan Cohen, a leader in family constellations and ancestral healing. We discuss his work in prisons, the power of constellations, and how AI could shape healing. We also explore alchemy and transformation, and what it takes to break free from inherited burdens. If you're curious about how hidden forces shape your life, this episode's for you. Thank you. Dan, how are you?
Good, great. Really glad. Glad to see you and to have this time together is really special.
Thank you. And, very quietly in the background, you've had a huge influence in how I look at constellations. So I want to start off with gratitude to say thank you. Sophie Sudai, my dear friend, would always talk about the work that you've done and, the different modalities that you've done, and always been just as fascinated by how profound this work is and your background, being very technical and then getting into the constellation world. So tell me a little bit about how that journey started.
It's I'm old, so it gets to be a longer and longer story. I'll try to minimize it a little bit. I grew up in New York City during the civil rights movement and then the Black Power movement. I went to middle school and high school in Harlem, so this activism was really close. And the school that I went to was a progressive private school in Manhattan, small, racially diverse in a lot of different ways. And they really put a lot of emphasis on making the world a better place, just change the world in your little corner of it. And when I got into my 20s, I was moving around a little bit, and I took a class at Northwestern University with a professor who had done her dissertation on Isaac Newton's alchemy. She was only one of two academics in the world who had really seen the alchemical papers. They had been hidden for centuries. And it's an interesting story, but I won't go into the details. But she was a high school science teacher in Arkansas, in her hometown, and she ended up at Cambridge University and to do a dissertation on the history of science. And she was given these alchemical papers and invited to go into the data and write a dissertation. And what she discovered was that the modern scientific worldview, which I had grown up on, the materialism, secular humanism, the physicalism, the belief that humans used to think that the sun was at the center, the earth was at the center of the universe, and the planets and the stars and the sun, everything orbited around the earth. And the earth had been created by God, and man had been put on earth, and then women as a kind of helper. And this was the universe. It existed in this celestial sphere. And then science came along in the 1600s and blew the whole thing up and discovered through observation and mathematics that the sun was at the center, everything orbited around the sun, and that the earth went from the center of the universe to just like a pebble in the vast emptiness. And it made our lives empty as well. That this huge existential dilemma of the modern time is the way that this scientific shift changed us from feeling ourselves at the center of the universe to basically nothing, to just an accidental collection of chemicals that with no meaning or purpose, just through blind chance, just happened to come together just somehow. What she taught from Newton's work is that basically there was no science behind the worldview. There was behind the solar system, but the principle that came from it, that the universe is empty and meaningless, and that everything can be explained in terms of physical forces and these laws of physics, that was unscientific from the start. And that it existed, it was created by the English crown and the global corporations, the first global corporation, which was the British East India Company. They needed an amoral theology to replace Christianity, which put limits on what you could do. And in the pursuit of wealth and empire, they created a theology that allowed unlimited amounts of enslavement and exploitation and extraction. And then they sold the scientific worldview that went along with it. But what she taught was that it was not scientific, and that the science actually showed that the universe is filled with consciousness, and that consciousness comes first. It's the primary mover is not matter and energy creating consciousness, which is the modern view. It's consciousness creating energy and matter.
Oh, wow.
And that science is more grounded in the experimentation, in the data, than the materialist worldview, which has basically never been confirmed.
So rather than being heliocentric, it is almost consciousness centric. That is, like, the consciousness is the base of reality that holds the universe together. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. If you look at the latest, like, kind of maps of the solar system, it's not what we were shown in school, which is kind of, used to do those styrofoam balls and the sun hanging, and you put the planets.
Yeah.
The sun itself is moving. It's flying at, like, billions of whatever miles, per second. It is hurtling through space and dragging the planets along with it, which are spinning around it. There is no kind of fixed heliocentric solar system the way we think of it. And that yes, it is all, everything that happens starts with the non-physical. It starts with consciousness.
Okay.
And the consciousness creates energy and then matter. And that there's a continuum, that consciousness is the most light. It slows down into energy, and then it slows down more into matter.
Oh, wow. Jeez. That's humongous.
Right. And this is confirmed in quantum theory. So the quantum experiments of the 1920s demonstrated this, that consciousness comes first. And the founders of quantum theory, Max Planck, David Bohm, etc., recognize this.
Yeah, the David Bohm stuff is so fascinating. It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the same as, what I'm saying. I could say it in his language, but this is his work as well.
Yeah.
So I spent my 20s and my 30s and most of my 40s on kind of a mission to solve the second half of the alchemical mystery. The first half, how to transform matter, how to turn lead into gold, also comes from quantum theory. And it is essentially nuclear fission is a transformation of matter. You could write how to change lead into gold on a blackboard with a mathematical formula. But what we have done with it is we've weaponized it, because the other half of the alchemical mystery, the kind of the feminine half, the non-physical part was left to atrophy 4 centuries ago. And so I took on to try to be a scientist of the heart, to look for how to create transformation in the heart. And I did that for about 25 years. And after 25 years, I came to a place where I realized there was a tool missing. That what I had to work with wasn't going to get us as a species or myself on this mission where I wanted to go. I'd kind of run out in terms of all the different tools of psychology and spirituality even, and religion and politics, all those things. They weren't really getting there. And so I had the opportunity to stop working. I had an engineering company that I had owned and operated for 18 years. And my partner and I sold it to a gas utility. So I got a little bit of money from the sale, enough that I didn't have to get another job immediately. And so I went looking for the missing tool. And I devoted myself to finding the missing tool. I knew it was out there somewhere. I assumed it was out there somewhere, but I didn't know what it was or where I would find it. But I saw a flyer for a Family Constellations event in South Dakota. I was living in Boston.
In South Dakota?
South Dakota, in Rapid City.
Wow.
At the end of November in 2000. And I saw that and I thought, this looks like what I'm looking for, just from reading the description. I thought to myself, this looks like it. So I flew out there. I registered for it and I flew from Boston to Rapid City in the middle, the end of, almost the beginning of winter.
Oh my gosh.
To do this 3-day with Heinz Stark, who,
okay.
I don't know if that's a name you know.
Yes,
but,
yes.
And when I saw his work the first day, I thought, okay, this looks like it. But I'm New Yorker, so it's always, everything's met with a lot of skepticism.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
But I wanted to pursue it, so I found out Bert Hellinger was doing a 7-day event in English in Germany that spring, and then Susie Tucker and Bert Hellinger were doing a training in New York City that started later that year. And I signed up for those. And then I also went to graduate school. I got a PhD in psychology, started that because I wanted to have some background. But I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. And that was the opening 25 years ago now to my work as a family constellation facilitator.
That's incredible. And so how, I know when you get into the constellation world, it's like first you start, attending constellations and then maybe co-facilitating some constellations or being used as a representative in many places. How long did it take you to transform into that facilitator role and really lead the constellations?
It was about 3 years of training. I did the training I did with Bert and Susie. That was a year. And then, Bert was coming back every year, and there were a lot of other Germans that were coming. And I went to Germany a couple of times to some other conferences, and then gradually started looking for opportunities. It's actually how I started doing work in prison, because there weren't clients and nobody had ever heard of a constellation. And then when you explain it to them, they really don't want to do it, much less interested once they know what it is.
The systemic resistance wall goes straight up and they're like, yeah, nope, I don't want to touch that.
Right.
So,
totally.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I recently, this is a very embarrassing story for me, but I was with my wife and we're on a plane. And I had picked up your book, and I had your book on my shelf for a little while, and I'm like, and Sophie Sudai, our dear friend, was saying, you should read this. You really should read this book because I'm doing similar work with a similar population, and so I'm reading this book, and I'm on the flight, and thank God I'm like on the window aisle, so my wife could shield me a bit, but I'm sobbing on the plane as I'm reading, and I'll get so emotional now, but just the depth of humanity, just really yeah, just the depth of the human spirit, and the arc of the human spirit. And there's a line about being in some way, and I'm paraphrasing here, but being in the depths of this prison, that creating this incredibly sacred place. And it was just that man, ugh, it just really, it really touched me, to see
Mm.
the resilience of the human spirit, that you can create this incredible modality in some of the most horrific, environments.
Right. And these, it was the men who were in that environment, living that environment, who had committed murders, who the ones that were in my circle had committed themselves to take a spiritual path and had been for many years by the time I met them. And so they were really ready for this, to do this work, and to, we work with the victim perpetrator bond,
Yeah.
which was not available for them with the other, there's a lot of volunteers that go in a lot of different programs in prison, but there's not really many that work with, that can work with the perpetrator in a healing way that restores the dignity
Yeah.
of the men. And they really appreciate it. And they're still with me. They closed the prison. Oh, it's been a while. It's been over 10 years. The prison closed, and the men were all distributed to other facilities. And I made some attempts to try to transfer to other facilities, but it's in the environment. I had to go through a whole vetting process, and it just didn't work out. So I've been out of that role. I would, if they were still there, I'd still be going in. I mean, I wouldn't have stopped.
It's
Um,
beautiful. Yeah.
but after they closed the prison, I didn't have a way. But they energetically and then through consciousness, they still with me, and they're with me in some of the really tough spots when I'm with working with a client who it just seems hopeless. The worst. They come and they stand behind me, or if I'm feeling. There was one time where I can't remember the details of it, but I was working with someone, and the issue they presented was the situation was horrific, and their resources were so limited. And they kind of looked at me like, how are you going to help me? Like everyone who's ever touched this has failed, myself included as a client. No one's ever been able to do anything good with this. It's just been one after the other. And they looked at me, and I felt really humbled. And I was like, well, what makes you think I'm going to be able to do something in the face of the enormity of this loss and the destruction? And this is when I felt the men behind me, a couple of them who had passed away, came in very distinctly, and they were, their message was, well, like, you're not here to be one more person that fails.
Oh, wow.
That's all they've had.
Oh,
You're in this situation that somebody come and do something good. Somebody come and do something that makes a difference. And that's what you're here for.
what a gift.
And I just felt their support, and we did a beautiful piece of work. And it, not about, me as a facilitator, but just working with the field and bringing in the resources of, ancestors and spirit to be able to, come in with support and just hold a container for what was possible.
Yeah. And that very much, parallels my experience a bit. I'm working with an organization called the Circle of Brotherhood here in Miami. And it's just like some of the most incredible human beings that I've ever witnessed that have spent, multi-decades in the prison system. And despite all the efforts of the system to maintain the patterns of pain, they've come out victorious on the other side, and through different healing modalities that they've found themselves and just, the transformation in face of the odds of these systems that are designed to perpetuate the victim perpetrator narrative or the victim perpetrator dynamic. So, when I saw your book and I started reading, I was just like, my mind just was continuously blown. And you and I had a conversation when I started doing this work, and you were like, it was, I'm, paraphrasing here, but you said something of the nature of like, it's the most rewarding work that I've ever done, and I was so humbled because I knew that that's the journey that I was on. And you just really start seeing, communities as systems. And when you start putting certain communities in certain systems, you start saying, oh, well, there's been a victim perpetrator dynamic going on for 600 generations, for 1,000 generations, that is like continually perpetuating the patterns of pain. And then now the culture is almost solidified into maintaining those structures. So how did you navigate? And it almost seems, I'm asking a couple questions here, but I always see when you go into like what I just saw, what I heard you say is that, there was like an opening in the system, like you went in, did a bunch of work, and then the system closed it out because it knew what was going to be changing. And you almost like inoculate the system with healing, and the echoes of that will turn into God knows what, right? I mean, one of the signs might have been that the prison itself shut down because there was already so much systemic reverberation throughout it, right? That they had to shut it down because it doesn't work anymore or whatever, for whatever reason. So I'm just always fascinated about the echoing of healing throughout systems, and if you've noticed kind of the same pattern in that way.
By using our bodies as instruments that connect to this universal field of consciousness. So there's a 600 or 1,000 generations, yes, of this kind of warlike, destructive quality. But there's actually 7,000 generations behind those 1,000 generations, because the 1,000 generations are about 30,000 years. And there's 200,000 years behind that of evolution of our bodies have evolved. And our bodies evolved with this incredible resonance and capacity to interact with the consciousness of the universe. And a lot of that culturally has been extracted from us. But evolution has maintained it. It's in our bodies. So when we are able to retrain our bodies to be able to interact with the universal consciousness field and do it in a way that we're not creating a new religion, we're not, writing it all down and then, presenting it as the new truth, but teaching people that every time you do it, the message is just for you in that moment, and the next time it's going to be a different message. And everybody gets a different message. It's just using evolution's capacity in our body to be able to interact consciously with awareness, because our cells are doing it all the time. Our cells are quantum machines that are drawing this information from the universal consciousness field. But our culture, language, and narratives all say that it doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it was, somebody figured it out 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago and wrote it down, and then it's degraded since then. The ultimate truth existed sometime in the past in this book with these teachings, and you can only receive it by kind of going back into that tradition, and then you can try to, revitalize some of it that could be useful for you. But my work is evolutionary. It's mystical, and it's evolutionary, that this is, what is going to happen in the next 1,000 generations of humanity.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, what are the possibilities for humans to develop our capacity to interact with awareness with the universal energy field or information field, and be able to live accordingly. And it's transformational. This is the transformation, and the heart is the organ of transformation in the body, where we can start to digest and process these old traumas and turn them into nourishment for future.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, what comes to mind right now is kind of this advent of AI, right? Everybody's talking about AI and how machine learning is working. And you know what? I'm so encouraged by this fact that what may happen is that AI shows us how much dark matter there actually is, which is this universal morphogenetic, consciousness, whatever you want to call the thing that we've all called it, the Holy Spirit, the universe, Mickey Mouse, this thing that connects us all. That the equation will be presented in such a way that, like, there is a dark matter here that we haven't attested for, and I think in some way dark matter may be that consciousness that holds everything together, and that will get to a point where the technology catches up with the spirituality in some way, because it makes no sense that the phenomenon that happens in a constellation happens from modern standards, right? That you can say we can do constellations on Zoom and somebody's representing the person's mother immediately 3,000 miles away, or however, whatever the distance is, and immediately starts weeping because the mother lost a child that she didn't know about, or whatever that is. And so it's not bound by time, space, and this reality that on a regular basis and in a repeatable, measurable, trainable fashion, we can connect to this knowing field. And there's information that you would never know about it. So I'm fascinated about what the future of technology and how it's going to connect with this modality is going to look like in the future. And thank you for being, standing on the shoulders of giants. And thank you for being one of those giants, because it's very fascinating to be doing this modality at this time, with all the past and incredible teachers that we've had.
Absolutely.
And putting that together. It's been really fascinating. So tell me a little bit about, the alchemical constellations. And I had the privilege to experience, you facilitated a constellation for me back in November, and it was extraordinarily powerful. I always like to go to facilitators that I don't personally know very well, because it's, you always get a clear channel, right? Or a clean slate. So I just jumped on the opportunity, and I just wanted to say thank you. But tell me a little bit about how you came up and developed that modality.
Mm-hmm. I want to, can I loop back to AI for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
I want to answer that, but you spoke about AI, and I have, there's an aspect to it. So AI, we'll get to the point that you're describing, but before it gets there, there's a way that the game is rigged. And it won't get there as long as the game remains rigged. In AI, there is an assumption that human consciousness is created by the brain. Yeah. And that the silicon chips are reproducing what the neural networks in the brain do, and that they can do it better than the brain. And so there's an assumption built into AI that the AI machines are going to be able to replicate and then improve on the capacity of the brain to generate consciousness. And so that's that is grounded in the same economics as the formation of the global corporations in the 1600s, the British East India Company. It is, if you look at some of the thought leaders, Harari, who's this guy? I can't pronounce his name. There's a guy who wrote the book um, Awakening to the Meaning Crisis. Most of them, Sam Harris. Um, they are all taking the assumption that consciousness is created by the brain. And until they get past that, the scenarios that you outlined, it will come, but it won't come until that barrier is kind of knocked down or overcome.
I just don't know how somebody could stand in a constellation, do a constellation, and be in denial of the, of what it is. It's just seems like it's about exposure. You can't. It's undeniable. It's truer. The information that comes through a constellation is truer than truth. It's the foundation of reality, and it's fascinating to look at it from that and be like, every single time, without a doubt, this information comes up, and it's as true as the sun is going to rise at 6:53 a.m. Is good. It's there. It's there. There's no denying it.
Right. So it will. It'll take time, but there's still, even in the constellation world, because Bert Hellinger was very agnostic about where the representatives are getting their information. And there is a lot of the constellation leaders who have succeeded the most and have the biggest platforms have not challenged materialism, have not challenged science. So they say, well, I want to keep this scientific. And then they explain representative perception in terms of neurology. They kind of reference it back to the brain, to mirror neurons. And so even in the constellation world, there is a question or a kind of fudging of where the information is coming from. And as you're saying, it's not coming from within our brains, because we're accessing information, and also there are after effects that happen. The woman who does a constellation, she hasn't talked to her father in 7 years, and she's in Germany and he's in Australia, and she does a constellation, and then the next afternoon he calls.
Yeah.
So many stories like that. So absolutely what you're saying, but we've got a ways to go, because the machine doesn't eat itself. So it's not going to easily, because if they were just going to look at the evidence, we'd be way beyond it already.
Hi, I'm John from the Zulu One podcast. If you like what you're hearing and it resonates with you, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. The link is below. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, we would be doing 20,000 constellations and putting, machine learning on top of it and doing data analytics on it and seeing, what the probabilistic math inside of constellations is and where it comes from, and say, there's actually a different phenomenon happening here that we don't understand. And I'm a big fan of Rupert, Sheldrake, and, just having conversations with him, because it from what I understand is that Bert and Rupert were friends, or at least knew each other about.
And they knew each other.
Yeah, they knew each other. And so the relationship there was interesting. And, I want to, my future kind of goals are to design experiments around, this morphogenetic fields and how it explains the phenomenon of family constellations. That is a consciousness question, right? It's like, where is consciousness emergent? And in how, and so if we, I go down the rabbit hole very quickly on this. I'm like, well, imagine if we started managing governments with, these principles, right? Or managing companies with these principles, and managing social systems with these principles, on principles of healing, and cultures having unresolved trauma loads, and then resiliency scores of how they're able to deal with those trauma loads. And that in some way religion has played its part on creating the infrastructure far enough to hear that, that we've built at least this infrastructure on, and then it has another evolution of what that looks like. And, there's a book that I've read. It's about a Japanese samurai. It says, "When you know the way broadly, you see it in all things." And I think it goes back into seeing this infrastructure that happens in all things, and this literally the consciousness infrastructure. And we have this odd modality that taps into this thing on a regular basis.
Right. And it is, I mean, it's happening. The Pixar movies, a lot of them are constellation influenced.
Yeah.
The judicial system in Brazil, they're using constellations in the courtroom. In the Netherlands, they use constellations in the government. The EU uses systemic principles in a lot of their agencies. So it is coming, and it's a bit of a slow crawl from what I would have liked to have feel that we were there, but I don't know that I'm going to be around to see it. But it's the arc is definitely moving towards an awakening of awareness to our interconnection with each other and also with this like quantum information field. So it's coming. It's an exciting time. It is a really exciting time to be a constellator. So you're hitting it at a great time where you've got decades to do this, and you'll see tremendous advances and acceptance, I'm sure, as more and more people become aware.
Yeah, it definitely is an exciting time. And I was fortunate enough to be exposed to Constellations in 2008. And so even that time, people would be like, "What are you talking about?" Just the fact that people had no idea, and then just being exposed by all the modalities of systemic constellations, the structural constellations, to your modality, alchemical constellations. Just to see all these modalities that emerge, and I think first one that said this, that many flowers will bud from this work, right? And that's exactly what's happened. People are doing it with horses and seeing like all these just incredible transmutations of this work. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm fascinated by this, and that's why I host this podcast, is to say, let's get the voices out there that have been part of this incredible community to have these conversations. So I think this is the beginning of something really interesting. And, people did yoga for how long before it became, yoga mats everywhere and Lululemons and, franchises of yoga across the country. So I think we might be in the 1988 of yoga, that right before it breaks through.
Right.
That maybe it's on Oprah's best modalities list at some point here in the next 3 years.
It's getting closer, definitely. Well, I could tell you about alchemical constellations. I know you asked. Please. I kind of looped away to AI, but talk about that. So the principle of alchemy that we're working with is the interplay of transformation on the material level and on the non-physical level. The material is kind of the masculine movement, and that's where manipulation, tangible, and the non-physical is more of the feminine.
Okay.
And this, the movement of science and corporations also corresponds with the witch hunts in Europe.
Okay.
And the destruction of the cultures of women's wisdom, of plant medicine, of telepathy and second sight, and these magical arts that were, largely destroyed in Europe and, in the developed world. And so the alchemy is to regenerate the parts of ourselves that have this capacity for magic, for psi phenomenon, psi awareness, and to be able to do healing through working with non-ordinary consciousness. And it's centered in the heart. And we're working with in an active way with the consciousness of nature and ancestors and spirit to basically be able to turn the shit of our inheritance, our trauma inheritance, to be able to transform it into compost, into nourishment. And the heart is the instrument of the alchemy. And then, we've designed some, I would say, some specific techniques in the modality of constellations, where we're working with, in a sense, with quantum theory to be able to release these entanglements. It's quantum. It also mirrors Taoist alchemy, which is it's different from European alchemy, but
I'm
they're
not
both
familiar with
about
Taoist alchemy.
right. Taoist alchemy is Carl Jung's alchemy. So if people who have studied Carl Jung and his alchemy, it was sourced from Chinese alchemy, from Taoist alchemy. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, he obtained the first translations of Taoist texts that were translated from Chinese into German. And he was completely taken by them, and then started doing his own writing about alchemy. So anyone that's read Jung's work on alchemy knows about Taoist alchemy. You might not know Jung alchemy either.
No, I don't. I know Jung, but I don't know of the alchemy side, which is interesting.
It's basically working with ancestors and ancestral consciousness, and the interaction between the living and the dead.
Yeah. Bringing ancestors into a constellation is just such a powerful tool.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's incomplete in a past family member who died traumatically or was some aspect of their life incomplete, in kind of a traditional classic constellation, we symbolically acknowledge that their fate and that loss, and then symbolically kind of give back to the ancestor. We have her set up a representative. In the alchemical constellation, I'm taken that the representative is literally channeling the consciousness of that ancestor. So they're not symbolically representing the ancestor. They are channeling, and that the ancestor is also entangled.
Okay.
And what the living person is feeling as their issue is the incomplete ancestor kind of pinging into their body, needing release. So the alchemical constellation is done on behalf of the ancestor.
Oh, wow.
And the ancestor completes their life, in a sense. There's something unfinished.
Yeah.
And they get to complete that and then ascend or be absorbed into the greater whole. And when that happens, the entanglement releases from the body.
Wow.
And it's not that different than a classic constellation or the constellations a lot of facilitators do. It's not a big shift. It's a change in language and orientation. And also using the observer effect for the ancestor and the living in a mind's eye, to be able to see each other and affect that release. So the ancestor is freed, and the living person has a release in their cellular memory. And so they are also freed.
Yeah, I really like it's like you're combining the very technical aspect of constellations with the shamanic aspect. It's like, and you're putting it into this like new methodology, which is beautiful. I really, really, really like it. And I really enjoy that aspect, is because I resonate with both. I'm very technical. I was a jet engine mechanic in the military. So that's what I did, right? It was like a knuckle dragging, knuckle busting very Tim Allen, and home, was it home improvement? Like very much of that. And then I came across these constellations. I'm like, oh, there's a whole different aspect here. So, it's very, very interesting. So tell me a little bit about, the epigenetic facts of how trauma works in the body. That, I think science has kind of caught up to spirituality in that aspect, that we do hold the cellular memory in our bodies about trauma.
Right. The latest research in biophysics and molecular biology suggests that every cell is a quantum machine, that the cells are exchanging information between the physical and the non-physical domains constantly, just continuously, that the information of how to survive is in the quantum information field, and it is being transmitted through cell communication at all times, and then the cells are creating the feedback loop to communicate back. And the physical manifestation of that are epigenetic marks. And this has been recognized in genetic science now for about 20 years. They thought in the 80s and 90s they mapped the human genome. And when they thought that would answer all the biological questions about all these, like, rare diseases, that they would see the genetic faults. But what they discovered is that there are far too fewer. The code was so much smaller than what the expectation was. So they then started looking at the what they call epigenetics, which is just a kind of the free floating proteins that are around the gene. And they noticed that those have marks. They have switches, basically binary on and off. And that certain switches are in an on position relating to trauma that is inherited. So famine, genocide, immigration, other types of catastrophes, they can see the epigenetic marks. And then in turn, those lead to diabetes, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, et cetera. And so through this work with representatives and constellations, we can access the ancestor who was traumatized, whose trauma is related to this, the epigenetic mark in the body. And when they receive their healing, people feel, and I'm sure you've noticed this in your clients, they get like, there's the big exhale. They have like goosebumps.
Yep.
They feel a big weight lifting off their shoulder.
Yeah.
There's a somatic, there's a big kind of shuddering.
Yeah.
They literally feel something losing their body, big chills kind of run through.
Yeah.
This is the epigenetic mark switching in all the cells.
Wow. Isn't that something? Jeez. I mean, Kellerman's work on, epigenetics and Holocaust survivors was really interesting when they talked about that. And, I wonder now if there's a post-modality study that you can see if the genes can be switched on, if they can be switched off on people that have gone through a healing modality on the other side of it, and which ones are most effective. Does that make sense? Like if the trauma is the epicenter of the beginning of the, markers turning on, that if there's a constellation or a, medicine sitting or trauma or breath work or something that turns those back to a more healthy epigenetic state than there was before.
Right. It'll come. I mean,
Yeah.
It's expensive. It's like those experiments cost, but somewhere between 10 and $100 million to be able to do that research, to really land it. Because if you do one experiment, with like 10 people and it shows something that doesn't mean anything, you have to actually do it in a way that is credible. And that could cost up to $100 million.
That's wild.
And then there's got to be a payoff. So, one of the limitations of everybody gets their own message and it's different every time is that it's really hard to monetize that.
Yeah. 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 You almost have to monetize it you have to look at it as a static in the system as a whole, right? And you have to look at it macroeconomics. If you look at trauma as barnacles on the ship, that's slowing the ship down, right? That creates more, everything that is not in connection is chaos, right? Or it takes away from the economic incentives like war, like, poverty, like divorce, like, violent crime is all static in the system that you can maybe potentially make an economic model to say there's a post-capitalistic argument for healing, right? It's like it is in alignment with healing is good for business. Let's just put it, and to put it in layman's terms, healing equals EBITDA, in some way that a healed business is a effective business and a business can create and not destroy.
Right. I mean, it could come. Right now the model that we have is take the barnacles off the ship in a way that they grow back by next year, and I'll take them off again.
Yeah.
Next year, and I'll take them off again.
Yeah.
You don't want to actually take them off so that they don't come back.
Yeah.
And when I started, I talked to peers of mine, psychologists, psychiatrists. They were like laughing at me. It's like, well, where are you going to get your clients from? You do like 3 sessions with someone, and then they're good to go. What kind of you will die broke doing that? And I was like, well, I'm never actually going to run out of people.
Of course, there's 8 billion people on the planet now. I mean, it's some ridiculous number, right?
Right. If I can do that, I will not ever get to the point where the last person has had their anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also with those 1,000 generations, there's actually quite a lot of trauma. Even when you do a constellation for someone, it's a big trauma field of those 1,000 generations that we have behind us, and they do keep lining up for more healing. The ancestors, don't seem to be. We don't seem to run out of ancestors behind us that need healing very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a gift and such an opportunity that we have to be at the kind of forefront of running this plane society that has the potential to help heal the world. Right. And doing it that way. And it's such a beautiful insight as well, is that you were actually, there's precedent that there were constellations in prison, and there were we got the United States government to pay for constellations before the same thing happened. It's like there was a door that shut, but it went, the little modality went in, and now it's doing this, energetic thing throughout the system. So, I have, this information that the United States government has paid for family constellations. Like that's a very powerful thing. Like just to say in that capacity that, and also the, constellations in prison and the work that you've been doing is just so powerful. So Dan, if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to connect with you, and I hope this is the first of many conversations that we have together, because I'd love to follow up with your work and just continue to keep you posted on, the work that I'm doing as well. If people want to get a hold of you, or I know you do trainings, and you're a very powerful trainer and very, very complete and diligent trainer. How do people get a hold of you?
Again, I'll answer that in a second. I want, the next conversation, I want to hear more about your facilitation and some of the growth edges that you're having and how you are, using your body to access and that would actually be a really interesting conversation
Yeah, I'd love
to hear more about the work that you're doing and just, kind of go back and forth about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely schedule another one and go deep and do a deep dive into the conversation. I'll hopefully it'll be very, very soon that we can have that conversation. So I'll really be looking forward to it.
Great. I would love that. So if people want to reach out to me, my website is seeingwithyourheart.com. And my email is dan@seeingwithyourheart.com. So I'm easy to reach. Sometimes I'm a little slow responding because there's just a kind of a flood come in. I'm very earnest, well-meaning, but I don't. Sometimes I have a hard time keeping up. And I do. We have a training program going right now, a chemical constellations training and facilitator certification that Emily Blefeld and I are doing together. We've been worked together for over 12 years. So Seeing with Your Heart is the two of us. And I have a class, Science, Myth, and Magic, which just started a few weeks ago. I usually do that once or twice a year. That's a 14-week class where I go into a lot of the history, do maybe 30 minutes of teaching, and then we go into the field and we do collective constellations around different themes that are alive in the group. And then we do, we work globally. So the next trip that we have is to South Africa.
Wow.
In May. It's almost full. It's going to be unbelievable.
That's incredible.
12 days. We have a 5-day retreat in a wild game preserve. We're going to KwaZulu Natal, which is where Bert Hellinger
that's
was
amazing.
in South Africa. We're going to go visit the monastery the monastery where he lived. We're going to go there, but we're in that region. 5 days in a game preserve. Emily and I were going to be constellating every day, and then also going on game drives where they put you in this open air truck, and then they drive through the game preserve, and all the big African animals are all there.
Oh, that's beautiful.
To see all them. And then we have a 7-day tour, 5 days and plus 7. So it's 12 days. And we're going to different sacred sites. We're going to these ancient caves and the river. And we're going to go to a village where there's a Sangoma, who's a traditional Zulu shaman. And she's going to receive us, and we'll do ceremony with her, and on and on. Anyway, it's a whole.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's an opportunity of a lifetime.
Absolutely.
That's a once in a lifetime kind of journey. That's amazing.
Right.
And you do Zoom constellations online.
Right. And then
Correct.
I have a private practice where I work with people individually. I do mentoring, which is a little bit more of a longer program. But I do, work with sick people individually. And Emily also travels around. She's going to be in upstate New York. She's going to Toronto, does live events, different places. So everything's on our website, on the events and the courses. So you can learn everything about us there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And hopefully we can get you down here in South Florida soon, Dan.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Really enjoyed talking to you and looking forward to learning more about your work next time, John.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to the Zulu One podcast. If you found value in today's podcast, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything to us. And thank you for being part of this journey.